Discerning the Will of God, Part 3, taken from the Spiritual Exercises of St. Ignatius Loyola, Rules 12 through 14. Ignatius of Loyola was a 16th century monk who gave us a guide to the spiritual warfare in his Rules of Discernment from his book Spiritual Exercises. These are rules that he gave us to tell whether our thoughts come from God, self, or Satan. Ignatius created 14 rules of discernment to help a Christian determine when God is speaking, when it is our own imagination, and when the message comes from the evil one. Now, these last three rules of St. Ignatius reveal three favorite tactics of our enemy to get us off track. And these are three examples that Ignatius gives. Tactic number 1, when the enemy acts like a spoiled child. Have you had any experience with a spoiled child? If you do, you'll know what I'm talking about. The enemy stays after us, pushing us to our limits. Like a spoiled child, he will push harder and harder for us to give in to his demands. Don't give in. Resist at the first moment we're aware that Satan is pulling this trick. When that attack starts, resist it immediately. Let's give an example of that. Let's talk about Evan. Evan promised himself one day he would give up smoking, but it wasn't easy. A week later, all he could think about was cigarettes. The craving nagged him almost all the time. So Evan thought to himself, if he just had a cigar, maybe he could forget about smoking for a while. Maybe one cigarette would be enough to satisfy him. Maybe he could cut down gradually instead of going cold turkey, he said to himself. So he gave in, and it was the best cigar he ever had. But the next day he felt the urges for nicotine stronger and stronger. His only chance to break the habit is to persevere. He must resist, resist, resist. And at times the urges will diminish, but not until he stands up against them. Evan goes to God instead the next time, and he prays for strength. And this time he succeeds. James 4:7 tells us, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. An example of Lisa. Lisa knew that Joe was no good for her, but she thought she was in love with Joe. She was deeply attracted to him and couldn't seem to give him up. Lisa needs God's help. Every time she thinks of calling or texting Joe, she goes to God and prays for strength to resist. It isn't her willpower that helps her to give up Joe. It's her faith in God. In time, God replaces Joe as the source of her strength. When she is lonely, she learns to seek God instead of Joe. And in time, that crush on Joe, which seemed so huge, became nothing but a memory. Tactic number 2, when the enemy acts like a secret seducer. Ignatius compared Satan to a secret seducer who goes after a woman and her daughter. He tells them, don't tell your husband, because he knows as soon as the husband knows, he'll be exposed and the husband will be out to get him. Well, Ignatius argues that when we are tempted by secret temptations, the only way to answer them is to find a spiritual person, someone we trust, someone we know is close to God, and confess it to them. Don't keep your temptation secret. Find accountability partners. Tell them to keep us straight. Help them keep us straight. We need the help of others to resist when Satan attacks as a secret seducer. Let's look at the example of Rob. Rob is a soldier stationed stateside, and he's married. He's tempted by an attraction to his best friend's wife. Now, he knows that is wrong, So he visits the base chaplain and talks to him about it. The chaplain refers him to a spiritual director who agrees to meet with him monthly and pray with him. Confessing his temptation to these two spiritual men and having them pray for him gives him the strength to resist. Let's take the example of Jim. Jim realizes that he has a problem with drinking, but try as he does, he cannot overcome it by himself. Not even prayer seems to be enough. So Jim seeks out the support of a 12-step group where people who have overcome this problem can hold him accountable. And when a burglar decides that he wants to rob your house, he cases it first. He looks around to find the weak points, the entry points that may not have occurred to you. He looks for places where the windows can easily be broken or where he can hide in tall bushes. Now, the only answer for a burglar to prevent him from doing that is for you to look at your home first. Look around and see the places where your security may be weak and strengthen them. Well, when you're in a time of consolation with God, that is, you're in a good place with God, and you're growing in the Lord, take the time to seek out your weaknesses. Find the places where you're not so strong in the Lord, and pray to God to show you ways to strengthen those areas. Most of all, be prepared. Examine your life for weaknesses. Use prayer, scripture, and spiritual disciplines to reinforce the places in our lives that are weakest, to prepare for the attacks of the enemy that will come later. In this way, we can defeat the devil even before he attacks. Jake's a good example of this. Jake is in a good place with God. His relationship to God is strong at the moment. So he asked God, show me where I can improve my relationship to you. After a lot of prayer and self-study, he finds that one of his spiritual weaknesses is his tendency to be alone all the time. He's an introvert. He prefers his own company. And for that reason, he builds weak relationships with others. Now, these weak relationships may be okay in a good time, but when you're in trouble, when you're weak, that's where Satan is going to attack you. And if you are a person who doesn't get along well with people, you're going to find that oftentimes Satan will attack you through those relationships. So Jake commits himself to building strong spiritual friendships with like-minded Christians. Instead of staying at home, he seeks out a small group of close friends with whom he can share common interest and be open and honest. He seeks to rebuild broken relationships from his past. And in this way, when the enemy comes around, as he inevitably does, and attacks again, Jake is going to be fortified against that attack at least. Here's a bonus tip that you won't find in St. Ignatius, but goes right along with what he's saying. In desolations, run to your strengths, but in times of consolations, work on your weaknesses. Know the balances of your spiritual life, the head and the heart, inner obedience and outer obedience, self and community, loving the past and loving the future. When God seems far away, go back to where you have always found him. But when God is close, seek to find him in new places. In this way, you'll be strengthening your connection to him and fortifying yourself against future attacks of the enemy. Prepare for battle. Most of all, strengthen your daily walk with God. Don't wait until desolation starts to start seeking him. Build on your strengths and build up your weaknesses in order to wait on him.